Hello, it's Pixel Weekly, back with another video. This time we're taking a look at the Motorola G5S Plus. Weird name, I know. This phone is the third rendition of the G5 lineup, with the other two being the G5 and the G5 Plus. There is a G5S that was released outside of the US, but as far as I know, that phone is not coming to North America. This phone promises long battery life, a big bright screen, and a near stock Android experience, for at the time of this recording, only $240 USD. And this entire video is coming from a previous Apple user. Before we get into the actual review of this phone, I would like to explain the differences between this and the G5 Plus. There are three main differences: the screen size, the cameras, and the amount of RAM. Everything else is shared between the two phones. The regular G5 Plus has a 5.3-inch 1080p screen, a 5-megapixel front camera, and an 8-megapixel rear shooter, and 2GB of RAM. The G5S Plus, on the other hand, has a 5.5-inch 1080p display, an 8-megapixel front camera, and two 13-megapixel rear cameras. These are literally the only differences between these two phones. With that out of the way, let's get to the actual review. As always, first up is hardware. I must say, not only is the build an extreme improvement over the G4, but it has amazing build quality for the price. It has a full metal unibody with slight chamfered edges on both the front and the rear perimeter of the device, has a big boastful circular rear camera hub with a solid metal wrap around the outside of the camera bump. Just above the camera bump and at the bottom of the device are subtle and, dare I say, HTC inspired antenna lines that are color matched with the two available colors, lunar gray and blush gold. I do much prefer the lunar gray color, and I also find myself wishing Motorola would release a black version like they did for the Motorola E4, but I don't mind the lunar gray version of this phone that much. On the front of the device is a big 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display. It's only $240 USD. I was not expecting amazing viewing angles, great color, or a very bright screen, but I got mostly all that. The two things that surprised me the most were the viewing angles and the brightness. I could turn this phone almost 70 degrees away from me and still see 95% of the colors I saw when the phone was facing me. The darker colors, of course, are the first to go, with me not really able to get rid of the brightest of the colors on the screen. Speaking of brightness, this thing is bright, like very bright, especially for a phone this cheap. I would say it matches or defeats my previous iPhone 5S in brightness. Where it's most lacking is in color. While it's certainly not bad, it does seem a tad bland at times, and with the vivid color setting on, some colors look oversaturated and almost painted on. Again, it's not extremely noticeable, and it's more of a nitpick than anything else. Other than that, the screen is nice and sharp, and the bezels are actually quite small for a phone at this price point. Of course, it doesn't have curved screen edges or an 18:9 aspect ratio, but again, it's a $240 USD phone. I wasn't really expecting that. Moving behind the screen, we have an 8-megapixel front camera and a dedicated front flash. While I don't use the front camera that much, my cousin seemed extremely impressed by the front flash. If you're that kind of person, this will be extremely convenient. The front camera itself isn't half bad. It's a bit grainy at times and one of the obvious cheaper aspects of this phone, but it's still infinitely better than a MacBook's front camera. Moving to the back camera, or should I say cameras, we have two 13-megapixel shooters that, other than a few software features, I don't really know the purpose of having two of them. They're both identical in every way from what I can see, and both have the same aperture of 2.0. What you can do with the two cameras is pretty limited at this point, and the things it can't do very well. An example of this is Moto's version of portrait mode. Results can vary from almost perfect to severely lacking, and in some photos the software blurs some part of the foregrounds or focuses on some part of the background when it's really not supposed to. It's been extremely iffy for me, and you can probably tell by the photos I'm showing you now. Other than that, the camera is actually pretty awesome for something at this price point. It can record full 4K 30fps, and it has electronic image stabilization. Here's what the same video looks like both with and without EIS. Overall colors are accurate and images are very sharp. The wide aperture also makes close-up shots look great. At first, I was extremely unsatisfied with this camera because videos often look cheap and grainy, but then I realized that the camera was on the wrong setting. Once I switched to 4K, I was much happier. It also won't matter too much that you're recording in 4K because this Moto has expandable storage, something I think every iPhone user wants. You can expand it up to 256 gigabytes, and I have 8 extra gigs in mine right now. This is something extremely convenient that I think every phone manufacturer should do. Moving back onto the front of the display, we have a fingerprint scanner, which is very fast, almost instant in fact. And moving even farther down, we have a charging port loudspeaker on the right, and microphone on the left. The charging port is sadly micro USB, but it does have insanely fast turbo power fast charging that can completely charge a phone from 0% to 100% in less than an hour. The loudspeaker is actually pretty disappointing. While it is loud, it gets very distorted very quickly. I definitely suggest using headphones or a Bluetooth speaker with this guy. Moving inside the device, here we get to the fun part, the specs. It's running almost stock Android 7.1 and is going to get 8.0 very soon, on a Snapdragon 625 and an Arduino 506 GPU. On my 32GB model there is 3GB of RAM, while the 64GB model has 4GB of RAM. We have a large 3000 mAh battery powering all of this, and it all fits into its tiny 8mm body. Web surfing, YouTube, and casual gaming are easy for the 635, and the OS overall just seems snappy. I'm sure this phone can't play the most power-hungry titles for Android, but overall, it's very fast. Coming from iOS, the operating system was very easy to get used to. I love how much you can customize, and I love the simplicity of everything. I'd actually say the operating system is pretty similar in iOS and usability, and better than iOS in customization and overall appearance. App support in my experience was also very good, with there being only one app I had on my iPhone that I couldn't get on Android. Just before we end this video out, I'd like to sorta annoyingly remind you that I have both a Patreon and merch on Spreadshirt. I apologize for shoehorning this into the video, but since I now can't monetize my videos until I reach 1,000 subscribers, I thought I'd let you guys know that there are other ways you can support me. Please do not donate if you are struggling yourself, because I don't want to take anything away from people that truly need it. Feel absolutely no pressure to donate, but if you would like to at all, I will leave both a link to my Spreadshirt and my Patreon in the description. This will both help me buy new gear for the channel and also help me start saving for personal items like my first car. If you'd like to donate but don't want to support me financially, there's another amazing way you could help me, and that is by sharing or liking the video. You could also help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers by subscribing to the channel. I promise you won't regret it. With that out of the way, overall this phone is quite a deal at the time of this recording, being only $10 more than the normal G5 Plus, and on some websites it's actually cheaper than the G5 Plus. But both phones are awesome at this price point. Getting nearly stock Android on capable hardware and a stylish, well-built phone for under $300 USD is just crazy. Anyone wanting a cheaper Android phone but are frightened by how many options there are, this phone is the best place to start, hands down. I feel the best way to sum this phone up is by a quote. Cheap phones are getting good, and good phones are getting cheap. Marques Brownlee. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below, and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Make sure to subscribe to get me to my new goal of 1,000 subscribers, and stay tuned for more Pixel Weekly.